Hello and welcome to Questions with Mike. I'm Mike, and today we're going to answer the question, is prayer a waste of time? Now, if you had asked me this when I was like 18, 19, I might have told you, absolutely. And I wouldn't have admitted it out loud because I've been a Christian my whole life, so I never would have admitted that I hated prayer. But for a chunk of time there, in my early 20s, prayer, gosh, I was like, no, it's a waste. It feels like, it doesn't feel worth it to me. It feels like a lot of work. It doesn't feel like it produces much. And I know what we're taught and what we're supposed to believe, and I know all the things. I could teach the things. I didn't care. Like, it just felt like such a waste of time. You know what I mean? So if you had asked me that back then from what I knew and where I was at that point, I would have been like, yeah, I mean, don't do it. Instead, do these other things. And I still kind of have a value for that. I think I think there's a practice in Christianity where we actually want to pray about stuff that we should be doing something about, right? I'm not saying prayer is a waste of time. It's actually not. We're going to get to that. But I think sometimes Christians want to go the prayer route when they need to go to the confrontation route. They want to go the prayer route when they need to go to the budgeting route. They want to go to the prayer route when they need to go to the brave route or whatever, right? So whatever the situation is, we want to just pray about stuff rather than actually go live our lives and trust in the Lord. And sometimes our prayer becomes our blanket and our wall from the nature of God. Oh, I'm afraid of the nature of God, so I'm going to go pray and consult and wallow in my feelings and try and get my feelings to change a little bit. And I want to feel good. A lot of the times I've found that tends to be the attitude with prayer. Not everyone, not always. But there's a general attitude about prayer in the church where people are running into a conflict or a challenge and they want to go to prayer to fix it, when they could address it in the relationship or in the circumstance or whatever. And the solution is actually found in someone being faith-filled and brave in their choice rather than being in their prayer closet. I'm not saying we shouldn't pray. I'm saying that's one thing I want to just touch on is sometimes prayer is a waste if you're doing it instead of trusting in the Lord. And sometimes we can pray instead of trusting in God, which is crazy. Sometimes prayer is actually in agreement with fear. For example, I remember I was traveling in an airport and some friends and I were traveling together and half of us got through and then two people got stuck because somebody changed my sister actually she just got married, so her license was still her old name, but her something else, her document was her married name or whatever, so they're having a problem. And so four of us are sitting there waiting for her and her husband and someone else. And I'm sitting there waiting oh, how long is this going to take? Would love to not have to sit here for a long time. And I remember thinking yeah, they're going to figure it out. I hope this just takes a couple minutes. And I had this moment where I was like, wow, I remember the time in Christianity in my life where this would have been a moment for us to grab hands and pray and intercede for Mika and go to war and stop the enemy from ruining her life or whatever. And that whole approach would have been actually motivated by fear. Please don't detain my sister, right? And so the prayer thing was a response to fear. And I was like, whoa, I remember that. That was normal. It's been so long, but in that context and that practice, that prayer is actually in agreement with fear. It's not appropriate. And I don't think people think about that sometimes. I think because it's prayer, it becomes a sanctified practice, but the motivation behind it actually defiles it, okay? Anyway, so that I think also is a waste of time. It's actually counterproductive. It's getting in the way of what should be happening. But prayer, here's where I want to answer this question. Prayer is not a waste of time when it's led by the Holy Spirit. When prayer is driven by our willpower, by our agenda, by our selfish ambition, prayer becomes something other than beneficial, other than productive. It becomes sometimes harmful, sometimes deluding, sometimes destructive, based on where it's coming from. Just like anything else in life, everything that matters is coming from the spirit world. It's coming from the motivation of the Lord. So if the Lord leads us to pray, to intercede, to make our requests known, whatever, then yeah, by all means, pray. By the way, just real quick, before I get into this, you guys, if you like the videos you're seeing, I would like to encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We'd love for you guys to continue to go on this journey with us. If you have any thoughts on prayer, we'd love to see you put some comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and responses and other ideas that are going on in this subject. If you have any other questions you'd like us to answer in this series, please send us an email at contact@mikemyshiro.com with questions with Mike in the subject line. We want to be able to answer your questions from here. And hit that bell button so you guys get notified when our next video comes out. We want you to be able to catch that. All right. Anyway, so prayer. We treat prayer like an event, or like a verb. It's something that you're doing, right? And I understand that to a certain degree, but I think sometimes the context or the container we put it in actually turns it into something other than what it should be. Prayer is not supposed to be something that we do to God. Prayer is a response to the Lord, and it's an overflow and an expression of his nature in us. And so sometimes the Lord is speaking to a situation and he wants to have something happen, and so we get to just agree with him and it expresses itself in prayer. That's beautiful. It's right. It's good. It's appropriate. That should happen. Sometimes we have requests, like we see things that need to take place and we want these things to shift or change or to be provided or whatever. And sometimes prayer is the proper response to the thing. We commit it to prayer and we surrender it to the Lord. But all of the things in prayer matter when they're surrendered and there's faith, when there's trust and submission to God. When there's our agenda and we're trying to persuade the Lord or like get him to do something for us and it's coming from like us being in conflict with his nature or his agenda or his will, that's not awesome. And I'm not saying we don't have conversations with the Lord. I'm not saying we don't make our requests known. We don't like negotiate with him. He likes to reason with us. That's a thing. But it's coming from a mutual like respect and then a surrendered trust to him and letting him be Lord and master and leader and author and father. From that place, prayer is a beautiful expression. But at the end of the day, what I'd like to propose is I pray all the time. It just doesn't look like the way Christians tend to treat prayer. And I pray out loud with my team all the time. I have them grab hands and we like say things out loud together to agree. And that's prayer. That's a form of prayer. But I'll go on a walk with the Lord and we'll talk, we'll dialogue. A lot of times English is not happening and I'm praying, right? Like, and sometimes like the Spirit gives utterance and you even like speak in tongues or whatever because you don't even know how to pray for what you need. The Spirit is making intercession in you or whatever. That's a thing. But again, that's coming from you being inspired and led by the Lord, not something that you're trying to make happen or something that you have control over even. You can surrender to his nature and then he expresses it and then you agree, right? And there's obviously a union and a friendship there, but there's an initiator. But at the end of the day, prayer is intimacy and friendship with the Lord and us getting to say yes to him in that place. And I would like to propose that that's prayer as well. And a lot of the time for me, it's not happening in English. My brain, my mind isn't recognizing it right away. My spirit recognizes it. And then at some point the memo gets to my mind. And my mind is like, oh, that's why that's happening. Great. Let's do it. Practically, statistically, here we go. Let's partner with and let's agree with that thing, right? But the prayer is happening in your spirit. So I absolutely love prayer. I actually love intercession. I hated intercession for a long time. I was super offended by it. But prayer is beautiful when it's surrendered to and inspired by the Holy Spirit. When we do it because of Jesus, not for Jesus. If you guys have any other thoughts, we want to hear your comments below. Hopefully that makes sense. We'll see you next time.